Hi, everyone. My name is Ron Bojana. I'm the president of Progressive Democrats of Hudson County, and today we have Bojana Coklyat. Is that okay to say?
Coklyat, Bojana Coklyat.
Yeah. Okay, great. And so she's running for Democratic County Committee for Jersey City's Ward D, District 5, for a community that works for people of all abilities. She grew up in Jersey City and has been involved in local grassroots organizing for 2 decades. And while in arts programs at PS number 6 and McNair, she became involved in the arts and has led her career in art administration. In 2009, Bojana began to lose her vision due to diabetes, and her approach to arts and culture shifted, which I find fascinating. I find fascinating the way that Bojana you've taken up on this and your talent. I just can't wait to get into this whole all these topics. She found that disabled people and the aging population were not being accommodated according to the Americans with Disabilities Act. Also, she found that while lack of attention to quality of life issues affected everyone, disabled and older adults were impacted more significantly. Bojana is 2019-2020 Fulbright alumni, project leader at the Museum of Art and Culture Access Consortium, and co-author of All Text as Poetry workbook that's available both in English and Spanish. So welcome, Bojana.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to also just start with a image description or a self-description for anybody out there who may have low vision or might not have any vision. I am a white woman with short brown hair cut into a bob. I'm wearing a little bit of lipstick today, trying to be a little fancy for the interview. I'm wearing a white beaded necklace, kind of a gray t-shirt with it looks like little birds on there. And I have a light green wall behind me. Yeah, Ron, do you want to self-describe as well?
Yeah, definitely. I have white background. I have black hair, short. I try to keep it short as much as I can. Short facial hair, and clear eyeglasses, and thick eyebrows, and dark brown eyes.
Thanks, Ron. Just pointing that out for all of you who might be wondering why I'm asking to do that. I live with low vision myself, as Ron said before, from complications of diabetes. And just doing a self-description like that can really help people who might not be able to see just have a better idea of who's talking and what they look like. So, trying to start off the talk with focusing on access for people who are disabled, which is really a big passion of mine. Specifically working on access in the arts, but that's also spread out into just access and disability rights for everyone.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and I've learned so much from you already, Bojana, and just you sparkled also that desire to learn, not just on me but on the whole organization. So I thank you very much, and I think that it is important because many times we don't think that there are other people that have different abilities than other people do, or there's a transportation planner that I follow a lot, Peñalosa, from Bogota, that he was saying we have to stop thinking of our cities and our streets as if everybody is 20 years old, athletic, right? And
yeah.
And we have to start thinking about it. How do we on all extremes? Because then we really build it up for everyone and not just for a very specific people.
Yeah, I think one of the things, if we're all lucky, we get to be to a certain age, and you get to a certain age, and things start to get a little bit more difficult. Like our eyesight starts to we lose some vision, we lose some hearing. We lose some mobility, stairs become harder. So these are all just real concerns that I think everybody realistically will face at some point in their life. And not to mention that 20% of the population of the world lives with some kind of disability. And, one of the things that I've noticed in Jersey City specifically is while there is the Department of Health and Human Services, and there is also a really great office on on aging, here in Jersey City and Hudson County, they're siloed from the municipal government, and I think from the county government. There's no real overlap or connection and collaboration. It's all very siloed and separated out. And that's also something that I've been, navigating and concerned about and hoping to work on during this campaign.
Yeah, no, it's something that definitely hasn't been, up in front and center of policies, not just at the city level, but at the county level. There's so much work that we have to do, and I think it starts with the committee seats, and it continues to really build that coalition of people that are thinking of a huge population, like what you just mentioned, is 20% of the population.
Yeah.
And even if it was less, it's an important population, and important because, again, those different looking out for those different issues that we have across our government and our cities can help across the board different people.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I went out canvassing on Sunday and it was like 93, 94 degrees. It was like so hot. But, talking to neighbors, like, it was really interesting. Once I was talking about disability, so many people either identified or knew somebody living with a disability, or they were caring for somebody with a disability. So it was really, it is something that is present. I think we don't always name it as disability, potentially, but it is, it does exist in the neighborhood and in the city. And I think it's really not a priority. Initially my advocacy or activism work, was focusing on the arts and finding, making sure that the arts were more accessible. And it was really difficult to get the, local governments on board and to sustain and follow through. And I think when you don't have a good model for how we should be treating disabled people, or, we're talking about basic human rights and, disability rights, civil rights, when that's not being modeled by the local government, I think a lot of people say, well, if they're not doing it, why should I have to do it?
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned something in our meetings, like how can we make even the meetings, not just in government, but across the board, like more accessible, like being able to, describe ourselves. And if there are multiple people in the conversation, make sure that we say our names before we start speaking. So that way, people can know, who's speaking at that moment. But if you could tell us also like a bit further about you and the school and the passions, the work that you've been doing. We could go into a bit more in depth on those topics, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. When you said the school, do you mean when I was working at St. Joseph's, or which? I'm sorry, you said school. Just don't want to.
Yeah, no. In whichever aspect you want to dive into. If you want to dive into in school in terms of your work, school in terms of your preparation, and school in terms of like you in Jersey City.
Yeah, sure.
No.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I had worked at St. Joseph's School for the Blind for about 10 years, like working as the art teacher. And while I was there, also working to exhibit the students' work. There is this huge misconception that blind people don't make art and don't appreciate art, which is not true. And I think those working with the students at St. Joseph's, those were true artists. And I think that that's just kind of the surface, scratching the surface of kind of these like certain stigmas and stereotypes associated with blind people or disabled people in general. And so, while I was working there, I was working also to provide those students with better opportunities and access to art. And then I continued that in my own education. I originally was going to become an art therapist, to work with people with disabilities, but then I found myself as more of an activist, actually, grassroots organizing, reaching out to different government officials, reaching out to the local ADA offices and people in the community, and trying to organize around more access and more rights for people who are disabled. And So I continue. I went to NYU and I got a master's that was focusing on art administration and disability studies, which gave me a lot more information and a lot better ability to explain, because you have to explain why these things are important. Why do disabled people need to have equal access, which seems like it should be such a simple thing, but it needs sometimes there does need to be context for people to really understand. And then moving past that, my Fulbright was focused on researching access in different institutions in the Czech Republic. And then I came back and I'm working with the Museum Art and Culture Access Consortium. So there's a lot of work focusing on access within that organization. And, one of the things that can really be the most challenging for disabled people is not necessarily always stairs or something is the not being able to read the writing. It can be people's attitudes. And I think that's one of the biggest problems here in Jersey City government is the attitude towards disability. Kind of like, well, why would we pay attention to them? They don't have any money or social capital. Sorry. And so that's something that I have been really trying to work to push back against, and also looking at the funding that's available to local groups like the Height Independence Project. They are not very funded. They've recently had, I think, some grant cuts. And then you look at Bergen County, and they have a lot of money that goes into that project. And like, why is that? Like, is it just because it's Bergen County, or is there something going on with our government? Like, why aren't we advocating for more money for the disabled population? Things like that.
And what are some of the things that you think? Let's talk about the Jersey City level. That in your neighborhood, for example,
yes.
Let's take a micro, like that you feel could be adapted and could be improved in terms of in connection to your passions.
Yeah, I mean, when thinking about it like on a more micro level, I think that safety is a basic thing that helps everybody, not just disabled people. And something, and this is going to sound like, of course, yes, everybody talks about that, but potholes can be especially difficult if you're crossing the street and it's unexpected and you can't see it, or if you have mobility limitations, or, when sidewalks, they, need to be fixed because they're cracked, or a tree root has come up and has caused it to be, unsafe, or things like drooping tree branches, or one thing that my neighbors were talking about is a speed bump on our block, because there's been several accidents, people coming around the corner really fast. And so those are some of the things I think about in the neighborhood. But also, how do we then all the sample population of people that I talk to in the neighborhood, thinking about how can we collectively push for something? Could it even be something we start in the neighborhood, some kind of support network, a mutual aid network? Because if it's 95 degrees outside and you have high blood pressure, or you're diabetic, or you're in a cast, it can be brutal to have to go out. And so how do we also help our neighbors just in a very basic human way?
No, I think that's amazing, and that you've heard from the neighbors all these different topics and issues. Something as basically you said, like crossing the street. Something I've heard many people say is like, and I would say like, people are not perfect and people have different abilities. The crossing the street is like, and I've heard somebody say, well, they have to make eye contact, right, with the driver. And I said, well, I don't know if you've heard that one before. But
no.
It's like,
oh my God. Well,
so
I just pause.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking like, well, not everybody is able to, and like just make eye contact and say, oh, okay, this person's gonna stop for me when they're driving or riding a bike or whatever mobility, item they're using, the transportation. And I always say like, we can't legislate at the local level or even the national level thinking that people are perfect. We have to make sure that our streets are designed in a way that we are thinking people are not perfect. Some people are going to be worse than others in terms of how they manage like speed and going and crossing the streets and intersections. So we have to make sure that we are making it safe for everyone so that everyone can, coexist in the streets. So
I definitely agree with that. And I think that we have to kind of disrupt that. Like, this thinking that everybody, like you said, is 20 years old and really fit. I don't think I was even that fit when I was 20. It's like, I think that's even not, I don't know how realistic that is. But, I had to use a wheelchair for a little bit because I had a really major surgery on my foot. And whoa, man, rolling around in a wheelchair in Jersey City streets is scary. It is real scary. And I was like, wow, how do we improve this? Like, even if you're just using it for a little while, then I was using crutches, like, just thinking about some of these basic things that are concrete things that we can actually change and shift just to make things a little safer. Like, we don't want anybody to get hurt. And so just thinking more about those things through that lens of, our aging population and the disabled population.
Yeah, I mean, for example, like when there's a thought that, there's some space on the sidewalk so people can go around the car that's parked in the sidewalk.
Right.
And thinking, well, you don't know how much space like people actually need in order to go around, right? And so that's something that we have to keep in mind, and why there are some rules already in place that maybe are not being enforced as well.
Yeah, I think, one rule, something that I'm thinking about, like, I love all, the new cafes opening up in the Heights, but a lot of them don't adhere to ADA compliance with either, adapting their stairs and making them a ramp, so doing that, because that would help make it a lot easier, not just for people in wheelchairs, but baby carriages too, or anybody else who has limited mobility. And, all of this remodeling, that happens, like there's some restaurants that have opened up, they've remodeled the bathroom so it's accessible to a wheelchair, but somebody in a wheelchair can't even get in. And so it's just like, and that is just like the lack of oversight that happens with these restaurants opening up, like from the city. There is not an advisory committee on the municipal level who is like, oh, we should be monitoring this and making sure things are ADA compliant. There is not. There is not.
And that's so needed because, many times that's like an afterthought, right? Instead of making it ingrained as part of the process of everything that government does. And I think that's very important. We just mentioned is having that advisory board so that we're able to tackle those things at every level and at every project, because every project needs this vision of how to approach things.
I agree. And I think that maybe an architect, supposedly all architects learn about ADA compliance. Sure. But there's also loopholes. There's also there isn't any pressure from anyone to make sure that these things are implemented. There isn't any oversight. So there's always a pushback when it comes to these things, or, oh, that's going to cost too much money. And I think that, yeah, sure, maybe putting in a ramp, that will definitely cost money. But if you're already going to be renovating and, working on this space, why not make sure you include more people, the most amount of people? I was recently part of this Facebook conversation in the Jersey City Heights, and this woman asked if anybody knew about wheelchair accessible restaurants, and it was not great. It was really limited. I think we came up with 5 total in all of Jersey City, and one that had a wheelchair accessible entrance and bathroom. And it's like, how can that be? Like, there's a significant portion of disabled people here in Jersey City, and how are none of these brand new restaurants, like, at all? Nobody's mentioned anything to them about it. So
yeah, something definitely to keep in mind, and to not just keep in mind, but for all of us to be advocating and pushing for this. I think it's important. Could you, just for reference, could you give us a bit of a tour of what your district looks like in terms of like the streets, points of reference, just so people can guide themselves a bit more on where your district lies?
Yeah, so I'm in the Heights. I'm kind of like my district kind of starts between Palisade and Central. Well, actually, I mean, no, that's not right. Between New York and Central, and between Bowers or Griffith and Bowers. So it goes up. That's like I guess the square block that it's in, and it's a mix. Like it's a real mix. There are houses that have been there for a long time. Like my building we live in is like 150 years old. There's a synagogue on the block. It's really an old block. There's lots of renovations and construction going on. Going up, towards Central, there's a residence for like senior citizens. There's the Dunkin' Donuts on Central Avenue over there. And it's a lively neighborhood. There's people definitely say hello to each other. There are a lot of artists living on New York. Me and my husband are also artists. I really love this neighborhood. It's definitely changing. I think a lot of us can agree that's a complicated issue, seeing our neighborhoods change. I mean, I've lived in this part of Jersey City for 15 years, but I grew up here in Jersey City.
No, yeah, definitely. Jersey City and our neighborhoods are all changing, and like you said, it's a complicated issue because that also, if we don't address affordability, then that becomes an issue in itself. And I've always mentioned to people is like, we can all have nice things too, right? It's like for the neighborhood to grow and be better, and still for all to still be able to afford to live here. So
I agree, and I think somebody said this, like I think in the early 20th century, it's something like we all do better when we all do better, right? It's we can't be this like successful city or model city if only 20% of people are thriving. Like we have to really make sure everybody's thriving. And when we're talking about affordable housing, disabled people, are targeted because they might be on Section 8 housing or because, and that's, sure it's supposed to be protected, but I know plenty of situations where people lost their housing. And then what happens is, oh, we're going to move you out of the city, so we're not kicking you out, but we're going to move you to a different place. And like moving somebody to the suburbs, like for me, like I have low vision, limited mobility. I don't drive. I can't go drive to like the grocery store. So it's really, affordability, gentrification really does also affect, disabled people and the aging population. My father's 85 and, he definitely recently faced, I would say pretty, I think unacceptable situation with his landlord because he lived in Union City and the apartment was worth a lot more than he was paying. And, these situations happen every day and they're happening all the time.
That's something that also I try to prevent with my mom, because my mom is 68. And so for her, it's like some people are like, oh, just move out. And she's like, I can't, because like this is home. Like, I know the people around here. She walks around. She doesn't drive. She hasn't driven in like more than 22 years. So it's just like, and being able to walk around actually is what keeps her healthy in whatever she's able to, right? And so all of those components really, it's a reason why it's not as simple as just move out. It's something that has to go like, no, let's address the issue of affordability. Let's address the issue of being able to live here because it's not just home, but it's what you're familiar with, and different people that weighs in heavier than with others. Correct?
I agree. And I think like not just living, not just getting by, but also thriving. I think that we can do that. We can do that here in Jersey City. I think that every time they say they don't have the money, there's some other gala or there's some other event or there's something else that's being rolled out of nowhere. And it's like, I thought we didn't have any money. Okay. So it's really about what are we prioritizing? Why don't we have better mental health services in Jersey City for our communities? Like, that's a huge issue, especially coming out of like being stuck indoors and coming out of it, and there's nothing in place as far as like systematic counseling or consideration.
That is so true. That is so true. That is something that we are not seeing much action around. That
Right.
there is, if there is not already, there will be a big issue of mental health. Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
So I was going to say, we are a bit over time, but this has been
Oh.
so fascinating that I just
Yeah,
kept
yeah.
going. But I did want to give you a chance for you to address the viewers, let them know anything that you want them to take out of our conversation today and your run for Ward D, District 5 in Jersey City Heights. Take it away.
Gosh, I mean, I think there's so much to say. It's hard to distill it into one thing, but I think do your research. I think read about what the Progressive Democrats of Hudson County are doing and what they're about. I think that one thing that it really interested me in this campaign was about kind of a collective action. Like, if we get enough people together, we can have an impact. Running one person is not going to do it. Like, right, we're up against a monumental machine that has like very far-reaching fingers and tentacles and all that. But there is strength in numbers, and I think that that's something that I'm really drawn to. And I would say to people, if you feel like your one vote or the one thing you're doing isn't going to make a difference, then check out what we're doing, because we have that in mind. We know that there is power in numbers, and that's how we're looking to make change, by being a community, by sticking together and supporting interdependence. Like, that's a community, and that's how you change things.
Great. Thank you so much, Bojana. And again, we'll be looking forward to June 8th. Everybody mark your calendars, June 8th. Vote Progressive Democrats of Hudson County. Vote for Bojana.
Yes.
And
yes.
Looking forward to continue the advocacy with you, Bojana. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ron. This is so great. Take care.